we covered last week that ChatGPT can now see. It has vision capabilities, meaning it can now understand what is happening in basically any image you give it and do tons of valuable things with images that you feed into the system. Now, we all just got access in the past week, and we've been pretty blown away, I would say, by the capabilities so far. So, in this segment, we wanted to cover our experiences in very initial tests and try to drill into some specific use cases for marketers and business leaders, because I feel like while many, many people are quite impressed with this tool, not enough people are gaming out really what's truly possible when you add vision capabilities to a powerful, AI assistant like ChatGPT. So to kick things off, Paul, I wanted to maybe ask you about anything that jumped out to you as you've tried it out, that you've seen other people doing, and then I'll kind of share a few of the initial tests I've done as well.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk a little bit at length last week about it, but to actually see it working is, it's pretty hard to comprehend. So I keep going back to this idea that these models are supposedly just like predicting words, and yet, like I got it, I think Tuesday night, maybe it got turned on in my ChatGPT account. Um, when you give it images and you say analyze this, it's like, how is it? I still struggle to understand how it's actually doing it. And
Mm,
so I just went into like, because I got it like 11 o'clock at night. And so I went in and just like scanned my photo album. I was trying to find something that could be challenging for it just to like see. And so the first thing I gave it was actually my wife and I were at a Cleveland Browns football game a few weeks back, and we got there pretty early. And so I had a photo of the field where you could see maybe half of the stands. And it was pretty scattered in terms of attendance at that point because we were still an hour plus early. And so I put it in and I said, how many people are in the stands? That was my prompt to it.
mm.
And its first answer was, it's difficult to provide an exact number just by looking at the image, but the stadium appears to be partially filled. You'd need an exact count or more detailed method to get a precise number of attendees. So I replied and said, best guess, question mark. Try counting by section. So I just further prompted it. And then it came back with, all right, I'll give it a go. Based on the image, I'll start by estimating the number of people in a small section. Two, then I'll try to extrapolate for the visible sections of the stadium. From the image, a smaller, clearer section might have around 50 to 70 people. Given the number of sections visible and the varying density of attendees in each, we might be seeing about 30 to 40 sections in this image. So if we average the people per section to about 60 and multiply it by the number of sections, 60 people divided by section times 40 sections equals 2,400 people approximately. Remember, this is a very rough estimate for only the visible sections of the image. The actual number could be higher or lower, and the entire stadium would obviously hold many more people. So that's what I'm saying, where it's like, how? Like, it obviously has way more advanced capability, ability to reason, ability to like follow a chain of thought, ability to follow like a step-by-step process to do things. And whether that number is right or wrong, I don't know. I didn't actually like zoom in and count and verify. But for me, right now, it's all about the possibilities. I'm going to hear some of the examples you've done because I know you've actually experimented with it a little bit more than I have. But you can't use this and not have your head swimming with what's going to be possible in the very near future. And so I think that's the thing I was left with. And like we've said on the show many times, this is the least capable form of this we're ever going to see. Like Google's going to come out with Gemini sometime this fall, most likely. That is, I assume, multimodal from the ground up. Like they're building it this way where you can feed it images and maybe videos and text, obviously. GPT-5, whatever that is going to be and whenever it's going to be, likely going to be multimodal from the ground up. So what I think we're seeing is a glimpse into the very near future of what these things are going to be able to do. And they're not being trained in specific verticals. They're
Mhm.
being trained with this like horizontal capability that like you could just start to imagine all the applications. So what are some of the things you used it for? Because I think, like I said, you kind of explored some more use cases than I did.
So I'm going to share first a fun example and then get into the business and marketing ones, because the fun example hints at exactly what you just said, that it looks like this thing is doing some type of really interesting reasoning. So for instance, I was traveling, like you mentioned, for a talk this past week. I took a very terrible photo out of an Uber of the city disappearing behind me. It is literally just a small portion of the city's buildings. And it is a city that does not have a super recognizable skyline in this photo. Like you could look at this and be like, this could be any city in America. I have no idea. So I said, hey, given the limited information you've got here, can you tell me what city I'm in? And ChatGPT comes back and says, look, this is going to be really hard because there's limited information, no distinct landmarks. However, I'm going to give it my best guess. It says the skyline suggests it could be any mid-sized city in the US. And it says that given the broad possibilities here, it looked at, hey, it's actually got modern building structures. And given the broad expanse around the city, I'm guessing it's either somewhere in the southwestern or western United States, like Phoenix or Denver. And I, in fact, was driving away from Denver. So I realized that many people, when I've posted about this so far online, have said things like, oh, that's really amazing. But like, yeah, it's like making stuff up and like it's very confident and often wrong. I'm like, I get all that. I understand the limitations of these tools. I'm not saying just because it says something confidently that it is right. However, you cannot read something like this and not say, like, this is 100% better than I would ever guess in my entire life. Even if I was wrong half the time, it's right half the time here.
Yeah.
It is incredible to me what it is able to do based on very limited information. So that was kind of a fun one, but I've already started using it in some very simple and initial ways. I look really forward over the next couple months to just going completely down the rabbit hole with this. But to start, one example that I had ready to go the day before I got access to this, I had been taking some screenshots of some issues we were having with a contact record in HubSpot. In HubSpot, you can dive into the history of changes made to all the properties on a contact record. We were trying to figure out why did something change that should not have changed. So I actually, one of the screenshots was like, had no sensitive information or anything that was proprietary that we wouldn't care to share. Like I would send it to HubSpot support or whoever. So I shared it and it was literally just 3 contact property changes. And I said, can you like help me diagnose this person's contact info changed and I don't know why? It gave me an incredibly solid analysis that said, look, here's the 3 things that could be going on. Based on what I'm seeing, it looks like these are the most likely reasons this contact profile changed. By the way, here are some suggestions on what to do about it. And based on the owners of those properties, who to talk to in your organization who made these changes. It was literally, to your point about in the beginning of this episode, our agency background. It is 100% a question a client would have come to us as HubSpot experts to ask. It would have taken us 10 times as long to diagnose it. I know because I am reasonably competent in HubSpot and it took me 10 times longer to figure out what was going on. It was not some big rocket science analysis, but it didn't have to be. It would have immediately cut down by 10x the amount of time spent on it. And more importantly, it didn't have to spend a bunch of valuable brain power slamming my head against a wall for a HubSpot issue. So that was a big one where I was like, oh my God, this is where we're starting to get into the implications here. I've also used it so far to do things like what was really cool. I don't know if I could do this at scale, but it's super helpful to edit slides. You know, when you're staring at something that's visual and whether it's a slide or a finished design of a report, editing the words is a real pain because you're looking at everything all at once. I literally I intentionally put a typo into the slide, took a photo and said, hey, can you just vet that this is all, there are no typos? And it found it easily. So that was super helpful. And, you know, like when you're not in a word processing program, it can be hard to make those edits when you're in like PowerPoint or something. I gave it a chart of my LinkedIn follower growth over the last like 90 days, just the ups and downs visually. And I said, look, like, can you tell me anything interesting about this? Like, what should I be thinking about to grow my followers? Gave pretty good suggestions. It identified, you know, the peaks and valleys and said, here, you might want to go look into those and see which posts did really well on that day. I literally took a photo of someone's LinkedIn profile and I said, can you give me the pros and cons of how well the copywriting has been done on this page. Like, break it down for me. Did it really well. And I did the same thing for an ad in the airport. I said, like, what works about this ad? Why is this here? What might have been the thinking behind placing this ad in an airport? It was incredible. It broke it down perfectly.
Yeah, I again, this is like 2 days of the stuff we're talking about. So you can imagine though, like the couple of things that jumped out to me again since Tuesday, this is just the initial version of this. The accuracy, the reasoning capability, the problem solving capability, it's only going to improve. And we're seeing, restricted versions of this realistic.
Hmm.
Like they've put a bunch of guardrails in place,
Yeah.
which then leads me to, wow, as soon as the leading open source models also have this kind of capability. And again, keep in mind, OpenAI is going to be ahead of a lot of those players, but arguably they're maybe 6 months to a year behind whatever OpenAI is doing right now. You're going to have access to within these open source models, and some of them aren't going to have the restrictions put on them that these models do. Like right now, I think one of the things is like if you put an image of people in, maybe it like won't analyze faces or something.
Yeah.
I think there's some stuff around that. The other thing that I think is just really intriguing is the cascading effect on these like SaaS companies. So you just mentioned HubSpot as an example. To do what you were just asking, we would have had to have called customer support. And
Yeah.
it's hit or miss if the person you talk to has a clue how to solve the thing. Usually what they do is go look in the FAQs themselves or like the knowledge base and they try and like find it for you.
Yep.
So if these like foundation models that OpenAI and Microsoft and Google and Anthropic, like if what they build have these apparent like vertical capabilities where they're able to seemingly do anything, like analyze this, tell me how to put this IKEA thing together, tell me how to fix this bike, like you're just count this thing, analyze this chart, like what do you build software for? Like
Mm.
if these things become capable of doing almost everything, what do I need to go buy all these separate software products for? And I think this is something we're going to all be grappling with in 2024 is like, how capable are these models? And that's why I think all this experimentation and testing is really critical because, go back again to our agency days. We would build these monthly reports where we would literally take screenshots out of HubSpot and Google Analytics. Like, here's what happened, drop it onto the slide. And then the account person would go through and say, this is what happened. Here's what we did this month. Here's what it's up, it's down, it's whatever. And you're like spending all this time just looking at these charts. If these things can do that, it's a significant change. And
Yeah.
now I start to question, like, well, do I need separate analytics software? Like, do I need to be buying other things if it can just do this on the fly? And as we know, it's going to be able to build charts as well. Like it already
Mm.
does that with code interpreters / advanced data analysis. So I think one of the biggest unknowns going into 2024 is how far these capabilities going to go with these multimodal models when, again, Google Gemini, we assume is coming when we know we already have these capabilities in GPT-4V and we assume they are a precursor to GPT-5. Like it's an unknown for us as marketers and business people. It's a huge unknown for venture capitalists who are like making these bets on these software
Right.
companies that are building these vertical solutions for language and image and video, who maybe we don't need those things. Maybe we just literally need OpenAI and Microsoft and Google. So that's the stuff that I find the use cases are super intriguing, and like experimenting with these things are fun and like fascinating. But my mind is like big or macro, like, oh my gosh, like what are the implications of this to business and to software and to like where these companies go? Like, are we truly going to have 3 or 4 winners and everybody else is just irrelevant in 12 months? I don't know, but it's certainly a possibility that we don't end up needing a bunch of vertical solutions. These things are just trained to somehow do everything.
Mm.
General purpose. Like that, it's a whole, was it Microsoft? I forget, whoever published the paper after GPT-4 came out, GPTs are GPTs. Like generative pre-trained transformers are general purpose technologies. Like they
Yeah.
have this wide scale capability that, because there's no user guide when they release this stuff, it's up to all of us users to realize what it's actually capable of doing. And right now, it seems to be really capable of a lot of very intriguing things in marketing and business.
Yeah, that highlights a point that I keep coming back to because, again, I understand why people are sometimes skeptical of technologies like this. I understand why that they have vast limitations, and people are like, okay, I'm tired of hearing the hype around ChatGPT. You can tell people are getting burnt out, but I really need to emphasize to people both when you're thinking about this tool and the implications, we have to think much, much bigger. People are not thinking nearly creatively or big enough when it comes to what this means. Like, this is just functionally technology that can see and then think about what it sees.
Yep.
That's a really broad statement, but it is intentionally so. It is going to change everything that has anything to do with looking at things and thinking about them, which I don't know if you realize is probably like your entire life.
Yep. Yeah, and that's like whenever, we're doing talks and stuff or teaching our intro to class, what I always tell people is the only way to solve for this is comprehension and competency. You have to understand what the stuff is capable of. And then the competency comes from experimentation. Like listening to this podcast is great. Like that it'll help you like solve some of the stuff or at least give you inspiration to go figure things out. Taking some classes, reading some books, like all that's great. But until you actually go in and say, okay, I'm going to pick 5 things I do every week, and it seems like GPT-4V might be able to help me with those.
Mm.
Let me see if it actually does. You have to go in and try your own stuff and start to really experiment. I saw our friends at Stream Creative, I think they put an example up where they took like a flow chart from their whiteboard and basically had it like analyze that flow chart.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff where you have known things you already do, but once you start to see its capabilities, you're like, I wonder if it could do this. Like now you start to like think about strategic ideas and like bigger innovative ideas. And that's to me where I think a lot of the really cool stuff is going to happen, where people, once they get the fundamentals of what it's able to do, then they go and start pushing the limits. And it does not at this point appear that we're even like scratching the surface of what the limits and capabilities are.
Just one more comment, then I'll get us on to the next topic. It does just strike me right now talking. I cannot believe that this was less than a year ago. We were in a world that did not have this tool, and look how far
Oh,
we
yeah.
have come. It's
I mean, we're
incredible.
October 6th, so November 30th is when
Yeah.
ChatGPT came out. GPT-4 was introduced in March, right? Like
Yeah.
middle of March of this year. So yeah, and when you think about, so many people feel like their organization is so far behind and like isn't solving for this stuff yet. But I always have to put that in that historical context of like, yeah, this is like 11 months old that like most of the world has even known this stuff was possible.
Hmm.
And then this form of it that we're now interacting with is not, what, 6 months old?
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, it's really hard. And to think how good it has gotten in that time period, that's always like that. What does that exponential growth curve and
Mm.
exponential advancements in technology look and feel like? It's a really hard concept for people to wrap their minds around. And then you look forward and say, wow, like what does a year from now even look like? Like, how do you even project that and start to think about what you have to assume? We have GPT-5 and we have open source multimodal models. You have AI agents that are actually able to take actions on your behalf. And it's, I don't know. I mean, at some point we should probably sit down and have this, like, maybe we should do like a, what do we think's coming in 2024 episode or
That'd be
something, but
great. Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating stuff.